Mental health disorders are diagnosed based on a presentation of symptoms, feelings, thoughts, behaviors, not blood tests or anything like that, right? It's sort of this constellation that we put a label on. But it doesn't tell us what's actually going on for a person. It doesn't tell us what's causing those symptoms.
Welcome to Hack to Health, where we share practical hacks to help you live younger, longer. I'm Joe Steele, and today we're exploring a bold new way to supercharge your mental health with Keith Kurlander, a leading expert in psychedelic therapy and holistic mental health strategies. We'll cut through the hype around psychedelics, unveiling their real risks and powerful benefits, and share simple science-backed tools to crush stress, sharpen focus, and build mental resilience. Whether you're curious about psilocybin, struggling with anxiety, or just want a clearer mind, this episode is packed with hacks you can use right now. If you could talk about what your background is so people can understand where we're sort of leading from here.
I'm a business owner. I'm a co-founder of a continuing education institute. We've been around about 7 years and trained many thousands of people. We focus in psychedelic therapy education as well as integrative medicine in the mental health space. Previously to that, I was a coach, a therapist. I still do some coaching here and there.
My dad's retired now, but he was a psychologist. Mental health as a topic to me always feels like a puzzle because it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, like many things. Stress, anxiety, brain fog. For some people, I feel like they just stick around so long, even after they might try meditation, lifestyle changes. If you agree, why do you think that's the case?
This is a good starting to our conversation. It opens up kind of a rabbit hole of a couple things. What is mental health? What is mental illness? And then the other part of the rabbit hole is why is it increasingly becoming a problem in the last 20 years, particularly in teens and young people. As you look through different age groups, you see like the adults have always been a problem. 1 in 4 people, whatever it is, 1 in 5 people that have significant issues going on. But now with teens, it's higher and it keeps increasing exponentially over the last 20 years. And what we're going to see too, I think, is that as these people keep getting older, we're going to see increased rates of mental illness among adults now. So we could talk about why that is. But I think the first thing to say is what is a mental health disorder? So if we just start there, the psychiatric lenses, you have a constellation of symptoms. We either call it depression, anxiety, OCD, psychosis. And so mostly mental health disorders are diagnosed based on a presentation of symptoms, feelings, thoughts, behaviors, and not blood tests or anything like that, right? So it's like sort of this constellation that we put a label on. And there's been some use to that for sure. There's utility to it. But it doesn't tell us what's actually going on for a person. It doesn't tell us what's causing those symptoms. Then we get to the next piece of it is like, okay, well, let's say you have this depression diagnosis or you have this anxiety diagnosis. Well, what's causing that? The reductionistic model, which again has had plenty of use, that has happened in medicine over time. It's gotten more and more reductionistic to saying, let's create a medicine to suppress the symptoms and hope the problem goes away. What we see is that the problem typically doesn't go away and that we can only suppress the symptoms, in half the amount of times, or it doesn't always work. And then if it does work, what we also see is that there's this sort of cycle of works here, and then we got to adjust the doses and try new things because it doesn't totally take care of it. Outside of some very severe situations where it actually can make a real big impact, like psychosis and things. We got very reductionistic in medicine. So that was never about getting to the root cause. That was about suppressing these symptoms that we've clustered into what we call a condition. And then we get into the root causes, what's causing these issues. And that's what my institute that I co-founded is focused on, is this, and where you said it's like not one size fits all, because there's different causes. We know what they are, essentially. We know there's many. And then the healing journey is not a one size fits all.
You brought up an excellent point about teens. Why do you think we're seeing such a rise in this age group?
One of the biggest issues is social media. people can argue about it to the end of time, but it's common sense. The material in social media is like X-rated psychological material. Whether it's X-rated images, it's not always, but the material is so confusing and complicated, and the way that men and women relate to themselves and to each other in social media is extremely confusing to a teenager. And then also the amount of ideology that they're exposed to at a young age. It's a very big challenge and issue. So and then the comparison game and all that. So there's a lot going on there. I would say that social media is one of the main problems. The other thing is we've created more and more addictive outlets for kids with technology. I mean, the gaming has gotten so addictive in the last 20 years. Social media is extremely addictive just from how it works from a sort of neurological perspective. So there's that problem. And then we have other issues that lots of other thought leaders talk about, but we've got parenting dynamics have changed. I'm a parent and I'm there with this. It's like we've gotten really scared based on all the exposure to what was actually happening in the world. We're afraid like that our kids are going to go get shot or kidnapped, or there's been different things that have happened over decades that have exposed parents to things that were happening, but now we've get so exposed to these things, it's like in our nervous systems, it's hard to just let them run freely through the neighborhood, and that's not great for kids to not be able to do that. And I'm not saying I've got this figured out, but it's just there's a lot of independence that has been taken away from children where they learn and take risks and have to adapt. So there's so many factors. They don't have to tolerate frustration a lot because they're on tech so often. And tech is a good dissociative tool with dopamine to get away from the frustration. So there's so much, but this is a very serious problem we're dealing with. And it's translating to adults too. It's not just kids. We have a mental health absolute crisis and inflection point. We're either going to get extremely sick over the next number of decades, or we're going to do something about this collectively. But we're at a significant point. I'm optimistic mostly, but I think it's something that we have to be honest with ourselves about. Like, the tech is amazing, and I'm a tech guy. Like, I love this stuff, but like, we're creating reward systems with these things that we don't have control over yet.
Technology is awesome, and we utilize it for many things, including what we're doing now. When I see my daughter, when I see other kids at school, a lot of times they're just sitting in a group and they're all looking at their phones. So they're socially interacting, but they're staring at the device disconnected from each other.
So here we are. We've come to this place, and for the moment, this is about individuals solving this within their own households, and that's where we are at the moment. That's not going to be enough, I don't think, to solve this problem. And this is a problem for adults too, because the technology is incredible. Like, I'm a huge tech guy. My whole business can function because of tech, and I love tech, and I'm into it all. I'm on social media getting lost often, but what I'll say is that the tech we're going to keep creating over the next couple decades, we're losing control of our executive functioning slowly, whittling it down because the tech is getting better at responding to us in real time through behavior-based learning. So this is a thing that we're going to have to navigate here, and we just need to keep talking through it. So with all that said, we have a tech problem, I think. But we have other issues going on. I mean, there's ideological clashes and just a new flavor right now. There's always rounds of that through history. It's a challenging moment. With all of that said, it's not simple to be a human. Like, we endure a lot of internal suffering. Some people endure a lot of external suffering. It's not simple. And so we need the onus of healing and growth is on the individual. And so if you can take that on, you can hopefully live a really fulfilling life and get your mind into a great place and be healthy. And if we do that, we're healing the world, because the more people who do that, we're going to collectively keep growing and coming together and collaborate better.
People often will, he's got ADHD because he's always on, right? He can't pay attention in class, whatever it might be. and they're throwing prescriptions at the kids a lot of times. Do you feel that that's more of a quick fix, or are you in the belief system that those prescription drugs have their place depending on what it is, or is it more a root cause that people aren't exploring?
I would say well, let me ask, what's your opinion? Just so I know where you are.
My opinion is I think that a lot of times in modern medicine, a prescription is thrown at a lot of things. Again, I don't know what it's like to sit with a psychiatrist, so I don't want to talk about that from a experience because I don't have that, but I would imagine it's a pretty quick visit. And I would imagine a lot of times we're looking at what is this kid doing in class and what is the teacher's opinion on maybe how much they're paying attention or other kids, how they're reacting with other kids. I feel like prescriptions are sort of the go-to right off the bat versus trying to dig in deeper in what's going on.
No, I think you've got it right. Like, I think that there's way too trigger happy to throw the med at it. I don't know that people are trained enough to offer other solutions, unfortunately. I mean, there's some basic solutions that many people are trained in. But are they trained, generally speaking, are most providers trained enough to offer a wide variety of solutions? I would say probably not. That's one problem. And the second problem is because of the managed care model, they don't have the time, which you mentioned, to even offer other solutions because it takes time to work with an individual. So I think it's a two-sided problem. But yeah, I do think there are cases where prescription medication for ADHD, it can really help people. I do think there is cases for that. In my opinion, I would want Mike to have tried everything else first because, getting on a stimulant or whatever it is that you're using, it's a serious medication that you're on and your brain is developing. So it's not, I don't take these things lightly. I don't think people should, but there are kids whose life really changed for the better once they're on medication. That does happen. But there's other things to address. And, there's different views on this. There's people who will say like, well, predominantly these boys get diagnosed with ADHD. And, there's one view of like, they're not using their physical energy enough. They need to be outside. And I think that's all valid. I think that you have to look at their attachment system in their family for that child. And have they been properly shown how to regulate their own nervous system over time? Maybe not. If that's a problem, meds might help them, but it's not going to fix that problem. So they may have a very dysregulated nervous system, and the attachment injuries may have altered their brain, functioning. That's real, for sure. But it's not every case. I think people are wired differently from an evolutionary perspective. It's an interesting view that some people might have more of this like scanning brain. They're, like hunter-gatherer brain versus like the more modern, farmer industrialized now brain. And so that's an interesting view and may be true. And like that old brain pattern doesn't fit well in a structured learning environment. So on and on, I would say there's lots of root causes to explore with ADD and that they're not being explored, generally speaking, unfortunately. But education will help, right? Just education, it's going to help people. Someone's going to listen to this and start going, well, what else is there? And, attachment, that's interesting. Or my kid's diet. It depends how severe it is. I don't think often if it's really severe, it's just diet, but like diet can have a huge impact. I mean, you could have a kid that you didn't even know is already pre-diabetic because the kid's eating super high carbs all day and their body just doesn't process it that well. And now they have a metabolic syndrome that nobody even knows is there, and it's affecting their brain health. And so that's real too. So there's lots of different avenues. There's supplements that can sometimes support ADD, supplement multi-ingredient formulas that have been researched. This is also interesting. Exercise is a big factor, more so than even nutrition with ADD. A child needs to be getting a significant amount of exercise if they have ADD. It is a factor. And then the other factor that's not well known, that's interesting, is sometimes there's issues with the balance and the cerebellum, and so balance training has been looked at for ADD, which is interesting. as a way to help.
You personally went through a whole experience when you were 19, I think. I mean, can you talk about that? Just because I think that paints a pretty vivid picture on your direct experience.
Although I thought I had ADD my whole life, I actually don't technically fit well into but that's a side thing. What happened at 19 was that I was in college. I had already been struggling internally, but I didn't have words for it. I was very socially afraid and even slightly, not paranoid, just scared and fearful and anxious and confused. Anyways, did psilocybin mushrooms for the first time. I was in a apartment complex dorm that was, I think it was the 19th floor. And I ended up alone eventually, and I ended up getting very suicidal and thought I was going to throw myself out of the window. I wanted to, crawled back to the bed and didn't, and fought my way out through the night of, don't doing that. And then it triggered a very serious mental health struggle that went on and off for much of my adult life, of waves of it. That was always there with me, but I didn't know that at the time. And psychedelics showed me that, but there wasn't a lot of language and there wasn't a lot of knowledge or places to go understand this. So it was showing a lot of what was already in me. But this story for me, if we move from the ADD, which this is somewhat related, but this goes into what trauma is, because for me it was trauma. There's a lot of trauma in my nervous system, and eventually I started to understand that's what I was working with, but it wasn't until my mid-30s that I even figured that out. And I'm a psychotherapist. I was trained in my early 20s. But the trauma psychology was still very new 20+ years ago. It wasn't very around.
How does someone, when they work with you, how do you start so the people listening can understand your approach?
You want to do in the very first meeting, you just want to really understand a person and the different possible things that could be causing issues. You want to understand different categories. What's their relationship to meaning and purpose and what they value in their life? Because if there's issues there, they're going to not feel well. I mean, if they feel purposeless and meaninglessness and voids, it's really hard to not have a mental health condition when you're feeling those things. So you want to understand that, and kind of that can tie into spirituality and just their connection to self or other, just understanding that. And then kind of moving kind of up a rung, I just want to understand like what it's like to be that person inside themselves. What do they think like? What's their mind do? What do they love doing? What do they distract themselves with? And then kind of going up a rung to the body. I'm not a doctor. I'm a psychotherapist. But I still am educated enough to at least ask the questions to see if there's other things people need. So in the body, it's just like, what's their gut feel like every day? And how do they eat? What kind of fuel are they putting into their body? What kind of energy do they have? What's their sleep like? What other signs and symptoms might be showing that there's a lot of injuries in different systems in the body? And then kind of moving up another rung to just their relationships. What are their relationships like? Are they having trouble with that? Maybe a little going into what their history is like, childhood, just to get a sense of it. But, what's their current relationships like? Are they connected? Do they have the natural world? Is it going in nature? Can that help them? Or is that uncomfortable for them? And kind of going through this sort of map of just, the different things that cause disruption in a person. And then it's pretty much an hour and a half. You can get a good sense of like, okay, like we've got these handful of things that are really strong. We're looking to see if trauma, if there's a strong sense that this person's really dealing with a traumatized nervous system, which 9 times out of 10, if they have a mental health condition, it doesn't mean they had an acute traumatic event, but their nervous system's probably not operating well and is operating from traumatic patterning. And so you kind of want to get a feel for that. And then for me at this point, I don't really practice psychotherapy. I mean, I'm a coach now. If I'm going to work with someone, there might be some referring based on different things that are identified. And then it's like the path, if they're new to the path of healing, we're taking one step at a time. If they've done a lot of things, kind of focusing on maybe things they haven't done, or fine-tuning things. But what I'll say is everyone can get well. It's possible. Healing is possible. Growth is possible. Living an inspired life is very doable. But you got to want it pretty badly, because there's a lot of ways to just not have to go after that in this world. So you got to want it. You got to want to live an inspired life, and then you'll eventually get there.
Because I wanted to ask you two specific things that maybe, I don't know if they're kind of painted as like buzzwords right now. You mentioned psilocybin and ketamine treatment, two things I wanted to get into, because again, you had the direct experience with psilocybin. What are your thoughts on that? Risk, things that people should watch out for? Is it okay in some cases?
I'm pretty close to this question because I run probably the largest institute in training medical and mental health professionals in psychedelic therapy. So I've heard a lot. I've seen a lot. The one thing with psilocybin is we're an above ground professional training institute. So like psilocybin is mostly not accessible above ground, right? I mean, you can do it in Colorado. That's just starting out now through a state level measure. Oregon has a state level measure. So in terms of above ground therapy, it's not very accessible. The only reason that matters, it's not because it's a law. Like the reason to me, it's like the reason it matters is because you want to make sure the person you're working with is trained properly. That's what really matters. And if you're going to do it for a mental health treatment, if that's what you're doing it for, you want to make sure you're working with a mental health professional, because there's complexity when you have a mental health condition that only a mental health professional, not only, but almost only every time, mental health professionals hopefully well trained that they can see certain things. And you might, if you end up in the underground, and the only downside to the underground in my mind is you could end up where someone's over spiritualizing what's happening for you and missing some things that you actually need to go deal with. That's more medicine isn't going to help. And I think that's the biggest thing. And then you can end up feeling re-traumatized at a ceremony or something. But I'm not knocking ceremonies. I mean, ceremonies can be very powerful and beautiful and work well. But so psilocybin's one thing. Ketamine therapy is legal medically. It's a medication that's been around since the early 70s. It was not used as a mental health treatment until, it just started in the early 2000s and then slowly grew through different research. And now it's used a lot and mostly off-label, meaning it's, wasn't the original thing that the company went for the indication through the FDA. And now there is a new version of ketamine called Spravato that went through an FDA trial for treatment-resistant depression. And either way, it's mostly used off-label still, and it can be extremely powerful. It's great for treatment-resistant depression, meaning like you've tried things and you can't figure it out. So powerful that some studies you look at, it's like up to 70% of the people who do it will have their symptoms cut in half after a session even, which is unheard of when you look at traditional meds that quickly. You could be suicidal for months and do one session, and during the session the suicidal thinking stops, and that's it. For sometimes it's durable and holds. That's unheard of, right? That it's just boom. So it can be very powerful. It's not a panacea, but it's a pretty amazing intervention when it's right for people, and it's readily available. You can find it in probably every state at this point. And in many places in many states.
Could you walk through what that entails if someone's going through ketamine-assisted therapy?
Yeah, so it depends on how you sort of get referred into it. But, you may have had a doctor that refers you. You may be working with a therapist. Anyways, let's just assume there's a couple different ways. You may go to a clinic that's just doing the ketamine therapy for you. It may be an IV therapy, intravenous. It might be a shot, intramuscular, but there's also sublingual versions. It might be the intranasal Spravato spray in the nose. There's also versions that you put into your mouth that dissolve in your mouth, and sometimes that's actually done where you get that medication sent to you and then you self-administer it in front of your therapist who holds space for you. So there's lots of different ways that goes down, but generally, like, a sort of healthy structure of psychedelic therapy is like there's preparation sessions where a therapist is working with you and preparing for you psychologically and also just what to expect. And then there's the actual session, and if it's being held as a psychedelic therapy session itself, like there's usually a therapist then in that session with you to help you process what's going on if you need support. And then there's integration, which is really key, which could be many sessions after. It just depends on the structure, where you're really trying to, where the rubber meets the road, where you're trying to actually take an experience that's, ineffable. Like you can't even remember it fully. Like it's so hard to go back there and really remember. It's like a dream, basically. That's the best way of describing it. It's like during the dream, it feels one way. After, it's different. So you're trying to take that experience and walk across a bridge to bring it into your life and actually translate it, where there's behavior change and there's psychological change, maybe a worldview change, there's identity changes. Like you're trying to make that journey to make the changes in your life that'll stick. So that's integration. And so that, I would say that's kind of the map of what will happen in ketamine therapy if you're working with a full kind of structure.
People who are trying psychedelics, how can, if possible, you or therapists you train take these insights to enhance more of the natural side, exercise, diet, sleep, to boost the mental health? How do you take that psychedelic experience and use that for more of the everyday habits?
You usually fumble the ball and don't do well there, but you try. So yeah, I mean, lifestyle change is fucking hard. I mean, when you look at the research of behavior change, it's not simple, but we do it, and we do it usually over time. But it's hard to do big changes in your life, but it happens. I mean, but the thing is, what is nice about after psychedelic therapy is there's sort of a window of neuroplasticity where you might be able to actually make some new changes, where you might have more psychological flexibility to actually go and make behavior changes. So that is a thing that does happen. Whether you're going to have a therapist that's naturally drawn to focus on that, because as a person, many people, especially if they're coming with significant mental health disorders, they're not usually talking about their lifestyle changes. They know about them, but they're not like, okay, I'm ready, let's do it. That's hard to do. So you usually need a good, solid guide that's like, it's time. Okay, what are you going to do about this? Here we go. You're more open, you're more flexible. Eating all that sugar, we know your history. We know that it's actually going to make you depressed again in a month from now if you keep going this way. Let's create the plan, and you work with that. So I would say that is one aspect of use case for psychedelic therapy, is can someone actually go make some lifestyle changes after? It's one piece of it. There's also obviously like the spiritual, psychological changes that come out of it. But in the end of the day, like behavior actually drives our life quite a bit. So behavior changes is important to make some changes in our life.
People who are maybe exploring, psychedelic treatment, are there people that you would say, this is not for you? Quite
a bit of psychedelics, but in the last 10 years, I've done psychedelics 3 times. Prior to that, I've done quite a bit, but they're actually not great for me. I actually have to be very mindful, and going forward, I pretty much, if I need like a therapy session or I need that level of container, I'm very sensitive. So there's plenty of people that, so first of all, depending on the medicine, there are sometimes medical rule outs. So that's the thing. There's this medical rule out process. But then there's also psychiatric rule outs sometimes. Psychosis, or give a psychotic person a bunch of psychedelics. It's probably just going to make them more psychotic. So there's psychosis, there's sometimes bipolar disorder, even if it's not a full psychotic bipolar disorder. It's like sometimes there's some hesitancy there. It depends on which medicine. Some more medicines play better with that than others. So there's psychiatric things to look at. And then I would just say that overall, then there's like if you're trying to treat a personality disorder, which is like an injury to the personality, that's pretty hard to do. It's not necessarily psychedelics will necessarily make them worse, but it's just generally speaking, we don't have research right now that we're looking at, maybe from decades ago, that's really looking at trying to treat personality disorders. So, and that's just an injury to the personality from trauma. That would be my definition of what that is. So outside of that, psychedelics actually work in many cases. It's a very broad range of people that can do psychedelic therapy. So that's a good thing. They're generally safe. It depends on which one. And there are some risks to be aware of, like any intervention, especially when we're taking a substance, like there are risks. But generally speaking, they seem to be safe, and you might be on for the ride of your life in either a good way or a very challenging way. That's what you're signing up for, because you're like, I need something different here. So it can go either way, obviously.
What about the other way? Someone might say that might be a little above where I'm comfortable with trying now, but more of a holistic approach, staying away from obviously the prescriptions and even psychedelics. What would be some examples of holistic practice that they could try at home?
Then you get into usually the functional medicine stuff. And so you might be working with a functional medicine doctor and looking at the health of your gut. You might be looking at the health of your adrenals, other hormones, in your system, the hormonal system. You're probably looking at how, you might get into some biohacking stuff and put on a continuous glucose monitor and see how you're processing glucose or not processing it well, and trying to refine your diet. So you might be starting to biohack your sleep and get more sleep and better sleep, more quality sleep. If maybe you're sleeping too much, but quality of sleep. So there's this whole sort of functional health world that's extremely, extremely important to have good mental health. You're swimming upstream if you're not at all dealing with that. At some point, you're gonna have to deal with that if you want really stellar mental health. And then you might get into the whole supplement world if that's your thing, and that can really be helpful in this world. Maybe you have malabsorption issues. You just don't absorb the vitamins and minerals and things you need as well as other people, and sometimes macrodosing supplements can really help that, and you may have deficiencies going on. And so there's that whole game, and then there's obviously the therapy game, and that's important, and the whole trauma psychotherapy world can be really crucial for people and helpful. So there's kind of all different layers. Relationship counseling is usually useful. I mean, a large part of our trauma happens in relationship to other people. There's car accidents and things, and those are acute traumas that hopefully you get the right therapy and you can get over it. But a lot of trauma happens in relationship to others. And so that's a whole realm of healing that is, if we can focus there, we can usually make some real headway.
Where do you see the future going when it comes to tackling this mental health crisis?
Let's say the next 10 years. I think the near future is we're going to hopefully really see a proliferation of availability of psychedelic therapy. I think that's happening because we have multiple medicines in phase 3 trials right now, different medicines, psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, which got rejected, but it's being looked at again. We have some other medicines a little further behind. So by the second half of this decade, which, 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, we're going to hopefully start seeing approvals of psychedelic therapy, which will then make it mainstream once that happens, because insurance is going to be involved. It's going to be a part of medical systems, and very available. And so I think within the next 10 years, it's like your neighbor is going to talk about they've done psychedelic therapy, and you're like, oh, you did that? Wow. And that's how available it will be. I'm not saying 50% of people do it, but it's going to be a good portion. It's going to be like a go-to psychotherapy modality. So that's a big thing that will help us. It's still kind of a gross tool. It's not a precision tool in a certain way. We don't really have, I don't think yet, the type of precision tools we need yet. Even the psychopharmacological tools we have, they're not super precise yet. So post 10 years, maybe, 20 years, 30 years, we're going to get some great tools, I think. These might be implants. There's different ways these might look. They might be pills, whatever. But technology will advance enough. We're going to be able to start to really understand the brain map better. We're going to be able to start to understand the whole body better and be able to interface more and deal with these things in a better way. So we're going to have more laser targeted tools within decades, and that'll be a cool time, if we live long enough to see that. And so those are not far away. I think they're decades, and then 50, 100 years, there's going to be a lot of tools, but there's going to be a lot of problems. So we got to make it there. And I don't say that flippantly. Like, there's some very, and obviously technologists and futurists will talk about this. Like, we have the speed at which technology will grow in the next 100 years and what will happen with AI. Like, there are some serious considerations of, can we control this or not? And it's a real consideration. But with all that said, we're going to have some really amazing, I think, tools in mental health soon. But for right now, the next cool tool is psychedelic therapy. I mean, I think that's real. That's true. We don't throw out the old tools. It's like, but we need some new tools now. We need them. These are not tools that are going to be given to, 14-year-olds, but, and I don't think they should be. But, if we get adults a little healthier, that's going to translate. We're going to start to address problems more.
For people who are curious about learning more about this, can they connect with you? You don't know who to go to. You don't know who to trust. Certain sessions are run different ways depending on where you go. To just cut through the noise and create less confusion for people, where do they start?
They can come to our website, psychiatryinstitute.com. A lot of information floating around through the website about this stuff. We have a podcast, a Higher Practice podcast. We talk a lot about psychedelic therapy there. Me and my co-founder have a book coming in March out that'll be published. So it'll be widely available. And that'll actually be the first book that really addresses psychedelic therapy as like A to Z. There's not actually a book on that. There's like very targeted things that won't apply to the general person. What is psychedelic therapy? What do I need to know? That'll be there, which I think will be really useful. We need a book that just kind of explains it all. And different things too, like things we've talked about today. And it's good to inform yourself, obviously, because knowledge is wisdom and wisdom is power, right? We have to take healing into our own hands. We have to. It's just the weird, sad truth. Whoever hurts you, they're not going to heal you. So we got to do it. And then there's a gift that comes out of that. I think any good healer will talk about that. Like, there's a real gift when we heal our pain. We get to extract our own gift of what we have to offer the world. And then you give that to the world. And that's a weird, beautiful process of how it works. But that's how it is.
Thank you for your time and for explaining everything, because this has been huge for people.
Cool. Great. It's good to be here.